So good evening. My name is Carolyn Connors. I'm a longtime board member of Elephant Artist Relief Society, also known as EAR, and I'm also the lead of EAR's programming committee. First, I'd like to begin tonight in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth by honoring and acknowledging Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Nakota and Tsuut'ina nations. EAR acknowledges that this territory is also cherished by the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We celebrate all nations, Indigenous and non, who honor this land. We are grateful to engage in an honest and eager process of reconciliation. We are all treaty people. On behalf of EAR and the EAR leadership team, I'd like to officially welcome you all to our April 2023 Umbrella Talk, Practical Pillars for the Creative Industry, Professional Skills for Artists. We are grateful to each of you for choosing to spend your evening with us. Thank you for being here. This evening's talk is one of an ongoing series of events called Umbrella Talks. EAR's primary purpose is to empower artists in Calgary and area to survive and thrive as artists, and these Umbrella Talks are one element of what we offer. Tonight, we're offering up a new spin-off from EAR's annual grad school talk, based on input we've received from those of you who fill out our feedback forms. Our speakers, Marianne Elder and Kaylee Hall, will be looking at entrepreneurial professional mindset and skills, networking, CVs, bios, and strategies for success. This year, EAR celebrates 16 years of service to the local arts community. And even though EAR has grown and evolved over that time, our mission has remained the same: to provide practical resources that help sustain the livelihood and practice of artists in the Calgary area. To achieve this, EAR offers monthly professional and personal development talks such as this one, a twice monthly online artist meetup group on Facebook called Studio E, a wide variety of community resource information, which you can find on our website. And of course, our core program of emergency financial relief for artists who find themselves in a crisis situation. As a charitable organization, we rely substantially on you, the public, in the form of volunteerism, membership, and fundraising to do what we do. You can help us by raising awareness about EAR, and if you can, please consider donating online. Our heartfelt thanks go out to all of those who've already gifted EAR in the past. Every dollar donated is allocated to providing relief for artists in times of need. If you choose instead to become an EAR member, the proceeds from membership fees go to support EAR's admin and programming, including events like the one you're watching right now. Just one more thing. Throughout the presentation, we ask that you keep your mics on mute and also please turn off your cameras so there's minimal background interference. Please feel free to use the chat box to write your questions as they come up, and we will start a record of those for the Q&A portion of the evening. Now, before I pass you along to Kaylee and Marianne, I'll tell you a little bit about them. Kaylee Hall is a seasoned curator, instructor, and arts researcher who has worked in a variety of arts sectors: commercial and public galleries, government and post-secondary environments. She values collaboration, mentorship, and fostering emerging talent, and studies ways that artistic practice and entrepreneurship are mutually beneficial. She studies how artists and curators use new methods to create experiences with art, teaches post-secondary students about organizing exhibitions and trends while outlining the beneficial methods of developing a professional mindset and communication style in different contexts for artists and designers. Currently, Kaylee is a sessional instructor at the Alberta University of the Arts, where she teaches business, entrepreneurship, curatorial discourses, and art history. She holds an MA in the histories of art, University of East Anglia. And in 2020, completed her advanced management certificate through the Yale School of Management. She is also the curator of the Bow Valley College Art Collection and is a published art writer. Welcome, Kaylee. Joining Kaylee tonight will be Marianne Elder. For over 20 years, Marianne Elder has worked in galleries, higher education, and nonprofit art organizations, and has developed exhibitions and education programming in both the US and Canada. Marianne's experience includes being an adjunct professor teaching in the MA and PhD Arts and Cultural Management and Museum Studies programs and BFA Visual Arts program at Claremont Graduate University and the University of California, Irvine. She served 8 years as the Associate Vice President, Student Affairs at AU Arts. She spent 6 years as the MFA Program Administrator for the Claremont Graduate University. She was a Senior Curator at the Art Gallery of Calgary, Gallery Director at East and Peggy Phelps Galleries, and Collections Manager for the Capital Collections Foundation, USA. Marianne is passionate about sharing her knowledge and experience and has developed professional practices, workshops for emerging creative professionals. Marianne has been our much loved administrative manager, happy Administrators Day, here at the Elephant Artists Relief Society in Calgary since 2019. And now, without further ado, I will pass you along to Kaylee and Marianne. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the evening, everyone.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction and land acknowledgement. I'm Kaylee, and that was an introduction, so you have a snapshot of who I am. I'm happy to be here tonight joining you. We will be speaking to a PowerPoint slide deck, so you'll have visuals to land on, and we will be sharing the slide deck with you after the presentation. So feel free to give us your undivided attention. No need to scribble down notes quickly. You'll have access to the document. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so hopefully you can see it now. All right,
so not coming up yet.
We'll wait for a minute.
I see it.
Oh,
yes?
That's me.
Okay. Great. So we're here tonight with a discussion about the practical pillars of the creative industries, professional skills for artists. This is a topic that is widely asked about in my university classes. I think it's fair to say that artists of all sectors feel like they don't get enough of these practical bits of information. And so tonight, Marianne and I are here to share with you some of the things that we've been asked about and to share about our exposure to these art systems and how they require artists to continually update their CVs, their resumes, their artist statements, and often artists are asked to do things that speak to their own practice in a way that is quite challenging. So we're here to share and enjoy. So what we'll be covering tonight is starting with goal setting, understanding your goals. We'll share with you some strategies to discover who you are based on your skills and values, and relate that into how to understand your audience. Then we'll get into cover letters, artist statements, resumes, and CVs, and the different ways in which you can craft an accurate view of who you are for your audience. Building relationships, and we try to avoid that word networking because everybody cringes when we say it, but building relationships and different strategies for doing that based on your career path and the kind of art you practice. And then finally, I would like to share with you something called Blue Ocean Strategy if we have time. Okay.
So the biggest thing that I talk about quite often is that people need to look at this in terms of goal making, and in terms of when you're looking at what your goal is, whenever you're doing anything, whether it's you're applying for a grant, or you're putting together sort of what your values are, you're looking at your CV, or you're just looking at your career, you need to sit back and consider what is it you're wanting to accomplish. And a lot of times people will start with something that's fairly small and simple and easy to sort of digest. But I actually suggest looking at it from a large perspective. What's a dream goal? Something that feels scary to even think about. And yeah, go ahead, Kaylee. You can go to the next slide. And really think about sort of what that could be. So, I'll use art examples, which could be, you want to represent Canada at the Venice Biennale, or you want to show your work at MoMA, or you want to travel the world and do residencies or be a published author. Goals that seem quite large. I want you to start there and think about those things. And we're going to talk about how we can actually build a plan and look at what your actions, the small actions you can do today, from sitting, in a chair at a desk today to actually getting closer to the goal that you're wishing to get to. Go ahead and slide. And some of those things are about sort of visioning what it is you want to do, having a mission about where and how you want to get there, but really understanding who you are in terms of the values. Next slide.
1 second here. Oh, sorry.
And so when you look at this, you got to do it from an eagle eye point of view, and looking at your short-term plans, your long-term plans, and what are the spaces you want to play in? What are the industries you want to be in? Some people, when they think about their art career or their creative career, they think about it in terms of how can I make money? They're only focused on the next craft market they can get their work in, or they're focused on maybe, getting more views on YouTube or something like that. But you also have to consider, you have to consider the different areas you want to be in. You have to consider who the people are that you need to meet and know and sort of leverage to sort of get to those goals, and just have that really pull back view to really sort of think about where it is you want to go. Next slide. And so when you think about it, you think about it from like a 10-year goal type of thing. And I just go for sky's the limit, to be quite honest, and name it. That's the biggest thing. The scariest thing when you're thinking about goals that seem completely unattainable is actually naming it and writing down sort of the industries in which you want to work. But then really you need to do some little bit of research to figure out what the standards are, what it is you need to have or be or do in order to sort of get to those goals. But start from the top of the mountain first and work, and then we can work back and build the plan out, which seems a little loose, but as we go further, next slide, you'll see why it actually should work.
Okay. When we think about an eagle eye blueprint that is far into the future, 10 years, 20 years, our ultimate goal. The Hawkeye viewpoint is something that's much more minute and up close. Oh, pardon me, 1 second, please. So when we're looking at goal planning and strategies, we are looking at things that are 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, 1 month, and daily goals. And even the exercise of writing this down or speaking to a colleague or peer about what you really envision for your career helps build the goal and helps you achieve it. So after your 10-year goal has been set, you work backwards, as Marianne said, and think about what you need to get there and the components that are required in your lane, in your industry, and on the road that you want to traverse. So when we think about strategies, it's really smaller than the goal itself. If we have a 2-year goal of graduating from art school, our strategies might involve studying, taking care of yourself and getting regular sleep and exercise, financial planning. These are all things that contribute to the success and the likelihood of succeeding. And they're things that need to be done, especially for artists, especially for creatives who live in this world that is constantly changing, where there are no clear rules to follow.
And honestly, I'm a bit of a different thinker in terms of my organizational level. So I'll be quite honest with you. I'm a bit more go by feel type of person when I'm making work or showing work or whatever it is I happen to be doing. But I actually saw something a long time ago in an Oprah magazine. I don't remember what year it was because I'm old, but it was a Martha Beck article about sort of building a plan of islands. What's your big destination island? That would be your big island. And then draw that, and then draw the island you're on right now, and draw a few islands between that and the bigger island, and start to identify how you can start island hopping, which was it clicked with me for some reason, which was my version of what Kaylee will describe as a mind map, which is a little bit more of a formal way to think about it.
So mind maps are similar to the idea of island hopping, where we are in the center, we start on this diagram. It's a visual, so creative people usually like this kind of planning. It's a hierarchical relationship building map where we have a goal in the middle and we branch out into bubbles that we know we need. So this can be, for example, networking. What do we need to network? Well, these days social media is vitally important, but also face-to-face meet and greet communication is something that we tend to forget about. And especially now after the pandemic, when we're all feeling apprehensive and a little bit rusty at getting to know people, these kinds of exercises and consciously planning where to be to meet your audience is vitally important. Also, sources of information, inspiration. If you travel for inspiration, you have to work that into your budget. You have to work that into your yearly plan. Savings, of course, is very important. Education. So any of these components that branch out of the goal are the things that need to be at least identified, and then hopefully once the goal is set, the strategy comes into play. So this is the basic viewpoint of vision, mission, and values. The values are at the bottom. Our values are attributed to our heart and who we are as a person and what we value the most. From there, the strategies help us achieve the goal, and overall, we are working towards achieving that vision. So when it comes to goal setting, Some of you may have heard of this acronym, SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-based. It's not enough to just simply say, I would like to, study art one day. It's much more beneficial to us to set that goal as a specific, achievable, and measurable thing. So, for example, we all are artists, we all need funding, and we all want to find access to those funds somehow. If I say I want to fund my project, it's simply not enough. I need to be much more specific. So if I say that, $5,000 would cover my project, I'm putting in a measurable statement that forces me to have that number in my head. I want to secure $5,000 to cover travel, research, and art creation for my project. This is specifically what I need to do in my project. If I become even more specific, I can say that I want to secure $5,000 from CADA, Calgary Arts Development Authority, to cover travel, research, and art creation for my project. To make it even more specific to gain success, I want to, for example, secure $5,000 from CADA to cover travel, research, and art creation for my project. So I need to study the application. I need to know what the process is. Furthermore, I need to meet the requirements by speaking to past recipients. And there are other strategies to meet the requirements of that application. The language also changes. Once we have these very specific goals in mind, our security with the goal itself changes. And instead of I want to, we are now more assured of the goal coming true. I will. I will secure $5,000 from CADA to cover travel, research, and art creation for my project. So I need to study the application and meet the requirements by speaking to past recipients by the end of the year. So you're constantly giving yourself more and more specific points to achieve that goal.
And when we talk about this, and I'm going to now start talking about CVs, artist statements, and a few other things. And one of the things that I always talk about is, what are you doing it for? A lot of artists or people will say to me, well, how do you put together a CV? What needs to be in a CV? What's it supposed to look like? And I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever Googled how to write a CV, you will get about 50,000, probably more, search results that are not specific, aren't targeted, and won't exactly serve you. You'll get a lot of sort of boilerplate stuff. And ultimately, what I really want to talk about is professional standards. But at the end of the day, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, it's really about what is it you're using it for. So just generally, I'm going to start off right off the bat with saying everybody should have a CV. And I am as guilty as anyone else in terms of not keeping up my CV. I know people who are actually extremely organized and have all of their stuff together. But I will not do what I preach. I will actually tell you what you should do is constantly keep an updated record, because what a CV is essentially a record of your career. So keep a master, one that includes everything. Document everything you do, even if you just write it down on a scrap of paper and put it in a box. Try to keep a file or a record of the things that you say that you've done on your CV. So like, for instance, back in my day, we used to do actual physical postcards or sort of mailers out for exhibitions. Now they're more digital, so you could save copies of those. Anything that's a record of what you've done, keep that somewhere. Sometimes I'll keep the records and then go back and update my CV. Sometimes I update my CV and then have to go find the records. It just depends. You're always going to need this information in the future for something or another. I can guarantee it. It will come up and it will bite you in the butt if you haven't been keeping track of it. Because a lot of times there's job opportunities or grants or things that come up that you actually need to remember what it is you actually did. And ideally, it should prove the existence of everything in your CV. Next slide. So keep in mind what is a good entry versus a meh entry. And what I mean by that is CVs generally, like you can include all sorts of things. And when I have a master CV, so there's two different types. There's a full CV and then there's an artist CV. An artist CV is generally shorter, usually around 2 to 4 pages long. Some people say it has to be shorter. And these aren't necessarily for jobs, the artist CV. These are for exhibitions, grants, and such like that. The long CV is something that you keep as a professional record, which I've had to use in instances where I'm asking for funding. I've had to use it in instances where I'm applying for specifically academic positions, or even, if I want to be a lecturer in a continuing education class, I have to have a long CV. But occasionally you're going to be asked for a short CV, and that's what you would expect when you're providing a CV to like a gallery or something where someone's going to show your work. So the short CV highlights the most significant sort of professional things you've done. And you can leave a number of, like, let's say, if you're a young artist in your career, when I say young, I mean young in your career, and you only have, let's say, 3 exhibitions, there's nothing wrong with having 3 exhibitions. If you're an artist that has, 50, then you might want to pare that down. And so I can talk a bit about how to do that. The formatting is a big deal. Just like a regular job CV, you have to keep in mind, keep it simple, okay? Nobody's looking for, a colored background or fancy fonts. Of course, no one uses Comic Sans anymore, but tend to use, fonts and font sizes that make sense. Reverse chronological order. So the things you did most recently first are always listed. However, there are a couple exceptions to that. Exceptions are in the categories without dates, such as collections or gallery affiliations. So if you have your work that's been bought by collectors, that does not include dates, and they should be in alphabetical order. Other considerations, please, please, please remember that people looking at your CV may not actually be in your field. So whether you're a musician or an artist or an actor, if they're not in your field, you need to make sure that whatever's on your CV is understandable by them, and keep that in mind. Next slide. Order of the categories. So I'm going to give you guys, so don't worry, I'm going to give you sort of the professional standard of exactly what should be included, with a lot of instructions and information that's used. But the one thing that you should always keep in mind is play to your strengths for whatever the occasion calls for. So if you're looking to be part of a juried exhibition and you're applying to be part of a juried exhibition, put your exhibitions up front. If you don't have as many exhibitions, but let's say your education, you just finished a degree and you want to put that up front, you can just play to your strengths. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a specific order, but keep in mind there's certain categories that they're going to be expecting. Don't include categories that aren't relevant to you. So if you have never written about artwork and you've never had anything published online or in print that you've written, then you wouldn't have a publications entry. And don't pad your CV. Don't omit anything, but don't add things that necessarily don't need to be there. And list all degrees, even if they're not related to your practice, because sometimes they're relevant. There's been a couple times I believe it or not, once upon a time, did a child and youth worker diploma back when I first graduated out of high school. I went to community college, and I have that. And it actually came in handy at one point for me. So never omit stuff off of your CV. Next slide. We're going to get into artist statements, but I just want to say one thing about the CVs. The biggest thing to keep in mind when you're looking at them, when you're going through, the one thing that I want to make sure that you remember is that ultimately a CV, there's a difference. Let's talk about snobbyism for a second, in terms of, what's a show that's reasonable to put on your CV and what's something that's not reasonable to put on your CV. When I was first starting out, I was lucky because I had a group of people, friends around me, that we like to just put on shows, and we would just put on shows. And were those exhibitions? For sure. They were open to the public. We had opening receptions. We created a postcard. Was it just a bunch of us putting our work up like in a garage? Absolutely. Was it fantastic fun? Yeah. Was there a lot of back and forth networking when those openings happened? Absolutely. But would it be considered, I don't know, official? It's funny. They are. But ultimately on a CV, the things that carry the most weight are things that would be termed peer reviewed. because CVs tend to come from an academic sort of perspective, a peer-reviewed entry is something where you have been chosen. So anybody can go put their work up in a living room and have an exhibition opening and call it a day. And actually, there's a lot of famous artists in the US that started off that way. However, if you've applied to a jury and you've been selected by a jury, if you've been selected as part of a curatorial project to be part of a show, those particular entries are going to carry a little bit more weight depending on what it is you're applying to. Because ultimately, not only is it a record of your professional activity, it's also essentially providing you, what's the term for it? Like, not relevance, but some sort of like authority over your understanding. It shows what you know and what your experience has been. It provides, in some ways, credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's true for sure. So keep that in mind when you're looking at stuff. So if people have written about your work, all of those things, and there's a fantastic long PDF that I'll send all of you after this that really breaks it down. And the only thing I'll say about it is please read through all of it, even if it seems not related, because there's little information in the descriptions that actually will help key you into thinking, oh, like I actually did do something like that. The other thing is that a lot of the times there's categories like, for instance, publications, bibliographies, fellowships, residencies, grants, some of the educations, some of the solo exhibitions, juried exhibitions, selected group exhibitions. Some of those things you can actually act like it's things you'd like to do. Sometimes when you don't have things to fill the categories in a CV, you can consider it as a bucket list item. I never thought about writing about other people's work. Maybe I should try doing that. Gosh, there's a couple online digital publications that actually will publish artists writing about that. Maybe I should try that. It's a great way to actually see other things you can do in your industry to sort of further your career. Okay, let's talk about artist statements. So much fun. I don't know why, but I think artist statements are one of the biggest hang-ups for a lot of artists in terms of how to put one together. Why an artist statement? Honestly, a lot of people are going to need it, but it should always be a description of your work in your own words. It can be useful for writing proposals for an exhibition project. Let's say you want to be part of an exhibition or you want to put on a show, you would need to have a statement about your work. It's usually always required to apply for funding. It's often required when applying to graduate school. It's good when you're preparing for a visiting artist lecture. If you're applying to a teaching position, of course, teaching philosophy, all that's getting a little heavy. But ultimately, have you ever walked into a show and looked at the work and been like, I wonder what this is sort of about? And you read the artist statement and it either will help you or it will kill the show for you. And I've had lots of experiences when, someone's I've written a bio or they've written an artist statement or some sort of statement, and I read it and I think, oh man, I feel a disconnection from the work now. And it's really tough. Next slide. So keep that in mind. So when you're putting these together, and I have a couple other pieces that I'm going to send you guys afterward. A long time ago, from 2004, I saw the date on it, which I'm horrified because that was a long time ago. There was an article that I was in an art magazine about why an artist statement, and how they described it really sort of struck me. And I've kept it all of these years, and I've provided it to every young artist I've ever come across that's asked me about statements. And so I'm going to provide it to you guys as well. Essentially, know who your audience is. What are you writing it for? Stay away from jargon. And at the end of the day, keep it simple, meaning it's the what did you do? Why did you do it? How did you do it? The materiality. And it doesn't have to be fancy. I always used my mom as my sort of litmus for my statements. If my mom understood what I was talking about in my statement, then I knew that it was acceptable. When I applied for grad school, however, there was more jargon in it because that's what, that's what was required at the time. But you also don't want to be flippant, and you just kind of want to keep in mind what it is you're trying to convey. You're trying to tell a story about your work and have an entry point to your work. You're not trying to explain your work in a statement, because I actually want to experience it. What you're trying to do is provide that entry point. Maybe there's something about the materials you used, something about the process you did, something about the why, or why this body of work came up. Those are the things that are important. Next slide. What an artist statement is not. I think this is always important. Pomposity, writing a statement about your role in the world, no one cares. Grandiose and empty expressions and cliches about your work and views, please don't do that. Technical and full of jargon, don't tell me about Descartes, or don't tell me about Foucault, and let's not talk about Lacan, and let's not go into all those things. I went to grad school, I don't need to experience it again. Long dissertations or explanations, and like, don't get me wrong, there's places for that. This is not the time or place. Discourses on the materials and techniques you have employed. So you don't need to tell me about bone porcelain. You can tell me that you use bone porcelain and tell me why you used it, but you don't have to get into the technicality of it. Poems or prosy writing. I don't need a violet, roses are red to understand. That's not an entryway into work. Folksy anecdotes about some important event in your life. There's a lot of pushback back and forth about personal information versus, sort of like the whys. Ultimately, the more you personally are putting yourself into the situation, the less space you leave for your viewer. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Make sure you leave as much space for your viewer in your work as possible, and nothing about your childhood per se. My gosh, I have examples of that it actually did work, but don't do that unless you know what you're doing. Considerations. I'm going to say this over and over again tonight. Who's your audience? Who are you writing this for? What level are you writing for? What will your statement be used for? And what does your statement say about you as an artist and a professional? It's an entry point to your work. 9 times out of 10, people aren't going to even read your statement, but a lot of people do. Just keep in mind who it's for. Okay, next slide. Bios. We did talk about this. So bios are, and I'm going to provide you a bunch of artist statement stuff as well afterwards. Bios are a short description of your career as an artist, your major accomplishments. Should be no longer than about a paragraph. Basically, it's a short version of your resume or CV. It's the highlight reel. It's really just a paragraph of the highlight reel of the things you've done. Things that, like, for instance, for this talk, I had to put a bio together. Was I going to tell you that, like, I'm a mom of 2 kids? No, because that has no relevance whatsoever. Am I going to tell you that, I didn't even put in that I do a lot of administrative work? No, I didn't even put in that I was an executive director of a nonprofit for something that was unrelated. I didn't include that. I only included what was relevant and what would help you guys understand where my information that I was giving you was coming from. So keep in mind who it's for. So it should be a sentence about you and where you are in your practice, your general interest in what your work investigates. It can list your own academic background, and it can list important awards, residencies, or jobs you've had. Next slide. And like I said, some good examples of an artist statement will be provided. One, in fact, I actually have a beautiful, the Vietnam Memorial by Maya Lin. I actually have a copy of her artist statement that she produced for the Vietnam Memorial, and that I'll share with you guys and a few others.
Thank you, Marianne. So moving on now, we'll be looking at some examples of CVs coming up, but quickly let's touch on this idea of the relationship between identity as a creative and work. We know as artists that we often can commingle this idea of who we are with what we do for work. Many artists also work other kinds of jobs in other industries to support themselves as artists, which makes it even more complex. So we want to really spend some time and think about your value system and how you perceive yourself apart from your artistic identity. So professional status, and because we're talking about professionalism in this talk, these kinds of divisions are really healthy to think about. We know in the age of social media that if we mix up our identity with our social media website presence too much, we can lose ourselves in that. So I think it's important to be very conscious of who we are and who we are in our work life. So professional status is derived from the construction and maintenance of an artistic identity and its effective communication to others. As we know, artists tend to work in isolation. This presents a lot of complexity when we try to think about our identity. Many other kinds of jobs go to different environments. If you're a nurse or a doctor, you go to a hospital to work, an environment very different than the home. If you're a journalist, you go to your news station or you're out on the street talking to people. And many other careers have actual workplaces that are institutions and organizations set aside from the home environment. So we have to think about in what ways artists can derive connection under the circumstance of solitary work, working from home. It's important to recognize the myths and stereotypes that we have ourselves about being a creative person, and then, of course, how society views us when we say that we're an artist. These myths and stereotypes are regenerated time and time again throughout history. And the idea of the artist has been changing and evolving from the time of pre-Renaissance right through to early modernism and present-day contemporary art. So the idea of being an artist is often this notion that we are isolated, disassociated from the social mainstream, that we tend to be, up in a garret working or slaving away. And this idea of the starving artist, too, can really be detrimental to this contemporary world that we live in, where so much of the creative mind is being accessed by business and entrepreneurship. The bohemian stereotype is another stereotype of how artists could be misfits or outsiders, rebels, how they don't need as much money as other people because they're artists and they can survive just by breathing and being around each other. So these are problematic things that swirl around us in the ether, and they can prevent us from asking for fair wages. They can prevent us from operating as savvy business people when we need to, and it can be accepted as something that's just a part of the artist's lifestyle.
And one thing I want to say about that I find is always interesting is I actually find it exclusionary. So some people feel like if they don't fit one of those stereotypes, then they're not truly an artist, or they feel they have to put on those types of things in order to do that, or they feel they have to do certain things in order to consider themselves actually, to have value, to have skill, to have talent, to do those things. And this is where Kaylee and I talk a lot about the zone of genius.
Yeah, so the zone of genius is an idea that's been written about. It's also a philosophy called Ikigai in Japan, and you might see TED Talks about this. But this is the idea of bringing together our skills and our values, our passions and our talents, so that we are gaining energy, we are gaining exhilaration from the practice of what we do. So if you imagine a time when you got lost in your practice, lost in your music and lost in your writing, lost in whatever it is that you do, you are lost for the reason that you enjoy it so much that you could do it forever and it wouldn't feel like work. It would feel like something that is giving you inspiration. So we want to guide you through these steps to help uncover what this zone might be for you. Finding your skills, finding your values, in order to develop any kind of creative future, whether you make products, whether you offer services, or whether you're going for a specific job. We want you to know what you're good at and what your reasons and motivations are behind what you do. So voicing what you're good at in terms of your transferable skills will benefit how you can communicate yourself through a resume, through a CV. but also finding these values that are associated with what you do.
It also helps really sort of square in on your goal, like really being able to be clear about how to get there and what it is you need to do.
Absolutely. So, in the package that we will make available to you, there is a skills assessment that you will find that asks you about taking stock, for example, of what your specific skills are in the categories of communication, technical ability, management, numbers, creative and artistic practices, social, critical thinking, and business skills. And it's just a brief overview of what you are naturally good at doing, what you find easy, and what you find challenging. So, really knowing and thinking about the specific skills that you have accrued all your life, and then translating those skills in your resume in the language that you use is important. One thing that we don't talk about when we look at career are values. We know that companies like Apple or IKEA will have a set of values, a mission and vision, and that the values the company promotes are really supposed to shine through their employees. So, as an individual, you will have a set of values innately, and maybe you haven't thought about what they might be, but we'll provide a list to you that lists many, many different adjectives to describe from A to Z, to describe what your value system might be. And in order to arrive at those accurately, we will suggest that you show that list to a close friend, maybe a family member, somebody who knows you well. And we would ask that you listen to what they identify in you as your core values. This is also related to the idea of the heart or the pillar. And the reason why this is important is we want you to find a place to be that matches your values, that isn't at least going to be compromising your values. So quickly, there's 3 examples of how individuals might look into their past, think of an accomplishment. It could be from any time in your life that you feel very proud of and that taught you something, that gave you back something. So perhaps, you volunteered at an orphanage in Mexico for a summer. And this is coming from my life as a teenager. The skills that were required for that were skills such as caring for children, learning a bit of Spanish, giving support. The values that came out of that experience for me.
Anyway, go have your, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We're good. So the values that came out of that experience for me were social concerns, helping others, knowledge, public contact, and challenge. Those values equated to the idea that community was something that I really respected and needed in my future. Another example might be that you organized your own art show at some point. Many skills are involved with this type of task: imagining the show, renting a location, asking other artists to join in, contacting media, talking about your own art, designing the floor plan, and logistics. So really writing down every skill that you have done allows you to see all that you can do. Values that came out of that were creativity, making decisions, time management, and efficiency. All of that comes out to the fact that executing a vision is something that you might really want to do again on a regular basis in your future. Lastly, the third example I can share with you is that selling, although it's commercial, although some artists might consider it completely separate from what they do, it's an integral part of survival. So we don't think of business and entrepreneurialism as a dirty word or a dirty concept. It's something that's vitally important for artists, especially nowadays. Skills involved are all listed: design, planning, creative thinking, studying other people's work to differentiate from your competition, and then learning how to sell to buyers. Values that are associated with this: aesthetics, recognition, creativity, independence, competition. And so, although it may seem counterintuitive, wealth and the ability to make money from what you do is a part of your value system. If you're here, then these are the tools we're trying to give you. So being in the zone, as they say, or the zone of genius, gives you energy and enlightenment. And that's the reason why we do these activities where we are soul searching and really recording everything that we've done. As Marianne said when she spoke about cover letters and resumes, we really want to record everything that we've done, because skills can be identified and they can be used as transferable skills when we're looking for more opportunities.
Kaylee, do you want to do a quick 5-minute break before we keep going?
Yeah, we can do a break. It's about 8 o'clock.
Yeah. Carolyn and Margot, are you there?
Sure. Yeah, we're here.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll put the questionnaire into the chat right now.
Sure. Sounds great.
The feedback form. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please fill it out for us, as it does help improve our programming. Thank you. See you. Let's see, what time is it now? It's just about 8, so come back about 8:05.
Kaylee, do you want to share your screen?
Sure.
Okay, so we've included some information and there's a method to our madness. So we've included some information about cover letters, and we want to talk about it from the perspective of the arts industries. And because sometimes a cover letter and a little bit of a statement, there's some similarities, but it also talks about how you communicate about what you do. So practicing the exercise of writing a cover letter by finding a job you might apply for or something you might apply for, and highlighting the key descriptive terms and requirements in the posting. And one of the things I like to do is, if I'm looking at a job per se, I'll actually take all the things they're looking for and put it on one side of the paper, and then put all of the things I've done on another side of the paper, and then start matching and seeing how many things I actually have that I've done that actually match up with what they're looking for. Same thing with a cover letter. You always have to remember, and this goes back to know your audience. So let's talk about it within terms of a job, because when I talk about know your audience and artist statements and CVs, sometimes talking about it in terms of cover letters and resumes for a job make a ton of sense. So can you go back one? There we go. So when you're doing that, you have to consider that it's no more than one page, and you also have to consider who you're writing to. So if you're writing for a job, they know nothing about you. You're essentially selling yourself, but you have to tell them not just what you know and what you've done, you have to tell them how you're going to help them. Because everybody's coming from a place of themselves. So as a hiring manager, or as a granting agency, or as a curator, I'm looking to see if you are going to satisfy a need I have. So whenever you're approaching anything, think about their goals and try to help them meet their goals. They're more likely to bring you on, give you the job, give you the opportunity, show your work if you're meeting a goal. For instance, if there's a curator putting together a show about plein air painters and you make sculpture, they're not going to choose you. But if you talk about your sculpture in a plein air way, perhaps they might. I'm just saying, make sure that what you're doing fits. Next slide. So when you're communicating, like let's say an artist mentee is wanted. When you're communicating those things, like you tell them who you are, you tell them what it is, what your experience is, you can say who you know, and also what your last projects were, who you've worked alongside, and you're looking at the job descriptions. You're pulling all these things out that you actually match with. So yes, you're a Calgary-based artist. Yes, you did public art. These are the people you're going to be mentored by. Maybe you might know them. Murals, I have that background. Maybe I'm a skater. assisting artists, hands-on instruction, all those things. That's the job description. Next slide. So when you're writing the cover letter, you're actually going to talk back to them in the cover letter about what it is they're looking for and how you fit it. So it's not just about, am I good enough? It's actually, do you fit? But you have to make them know that you fit. So your knowledge of yourself, your skills, and sort of your experience, you have to translate that into words to actually match what it is they're looking for. So it's like, I'm excited to apply for this artist mentee position. That's what they're looking for. That where you saw it, it fits my experience level because I'm already doing this. They're talking about instruction and being able to work with other people. This is what we talk about now in the letter coming back. In my past, you relate the experience to mentoring and learning and those transferable skills that you bring to the position. For instance, let's say you're a skater, you're into public art. So all of those things actually fit what the project was, and you're bringing it back to, that's what you're bringing back to them. So it's all about that. Who's your audience? Who are you speaking to? Can you help them satisfy what it is they need?
Yeah.
Next slide.
And
Yep.
one more note I'd make too, Marianne, is just keep in mind that you're solving a problem for them if they're looking for somebody to hire. So what is it that you can offer them to help them solve their problem?
And so when we look at types of resumes, and I'm just going to glance over this because this isn't an employment sort of talk, but it talks about when I'm going to show you an example of a CV here in a second. So the types of resumes, the chronological, job seekers that have worked in the same industry. There's 3 different types that you use: functional and combination. You can find this information. All you got to do is Google it. But essentially, it's different. You use different formats of those sorts of resumes in order to customize what it is you're applying to. Can you go forward, Kaylee? We're going to include in this basically the different sections. Just keep blowing through these. And all of them have some of the same things, okay? The name, the email, the address, skills summary, professional skills, work history. Essentially, you're always still making sure that you're speaking back to what it is you're applying to every single time. Whether you use a functional or chronological or a combination resume is going to be dependent on what your experience is in applying to whatever industry or position it is that you're looking for. So keep these in mind. We have them here for you so that you have them as an example. Can you go forward, Kaylee, or can you share the next thing that?
Sure, I'll share the next document.
So I'm going to walk you through an artist CV, and I'm going to share one of my biggest, I tell everyone about this, so it's no secret, but this is a huge, amazing resource that I'm going to share with you right now. So the College Art Association, which is collegeart.org, puts out standards and guidelines. And generally it is for artists, art historians. Man, there's a bunch of different things, but it's really sort of the standard, the professional standards and guidelines for artist CVs, artist curriculum vitae, CVs for museum professionals. It talks about health and safety. It talks about post-secondary education. It talks about thesis requirements. It talks about all sorts of different things. And they have a standards and guidelines section on their website that I reference regularly. And I'm going to walk you through an example of an artist CV, and it's directly from their website, which I'll also provide you the PDF of this. So you can always go back and have a look at this. I'm going to walk you through what would be the short CV, but I encourage you to look at the full CV version of this to help sort of read the different pieces in each of the categories. It will help you identify things you're like, oh, I did that. I should include that here. Kaylee, do you want me to share it, or have you got it?
Oh, can you see it?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. Do you want to share it from your screen? That might be faster.
Sure. You just have to stop sharing.
Okay. I thought I was sharing. I apologize.
It's okay.
There we go.
I think it's this here.
Oh, I've got it, Marianne. I've got it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay. Can you make it a little bit bigger? Is it
Yes.
possible? Perfect. Okay. So the standards and guidelines, And these are used, I have yet to come across anywhere else that uses different standards and guidelines. So basically the artist conventions here, they're focused for use in professional venues. So commercial, nonprofit galleries, museums, art centers, but you can use these. This would be the kind of resume you'd use to go along with your work for a juried exhibition or for a grant or residency program or other sorts of things. So keep a comprehensive master copy like I talked about before, and keep in mind that institutions receive dozens of submissions per week when you're applying for things. So keep it simple and straightforward. You know, the formatting is important. Don't include a headshot, all of those things. Please don't do that. Save it as a PDF and a Word file. Okay, maintain an up-to-date copy. They should be, of course, like I said before, reverse chronological. And depending on your individual strengths, you may choose to rearrange the recommended order of some of the categories. And as a general rule, play to your strengths. So if you start up at education and name, if you scroll back just a little, yeah, okay. So the biggest things are, and this goes through, this is almost overkill when you look at it, okay? But I'm telling you, if you take the time and read through it, it will literally be your blueprint. So always, and it talks about sort of the format of it. So you can follow those sorts of intonations, the name and contact information, your preferred mailing address. You don't have to include a mailing address, but some artists prefer to include it. Some don't because of security. Phone number, please make sure it's a phone number that A, you want them to use, and B, that you'll actually get a response from. An email address, of course, I don't think I have to say this, but if you say, if your email address is ikillcats@hotmail.com, that might not be a great idea. You might want something a little bit more professional, unless perhaps killing cats is part of your practice, which I'm going to judge you, but still. I'm just saying, and I love cats for the record. Your personal website. If you don't have a personal website, that's up to you. Perhaps some people use their social channels to do that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And when you might want to eliminate some of your personal information, depending on where you're using this. So if it's going to be posted in a binder in an exhibition, you might want to take out your address and phone number and email so that people can't necessarily contact you directly. Education. Dates should always appear on the left, okay? And it should be listed chronologically, reverse chronologically. And it's not about, this isn't a show off, it's literally just who you are. It's not about proving anything to anyone. So keep that in mind. Always make sure you list education that may not even have an art or your industry as part of it, because sometimes that actually helps. And when you're abbreviating, there are general rules. Now, I will say this, there's something called the Chicago Manual Style. That's generally the accepted use for citations and formatting. And if you don't have a Chicago Manual Style book, I suggest perhaps maybe getting one, especially if you're going to do any writing. When you're going down, there's different ways you can do your education. If you haven't completed a degree, just hang on, Kaylee. If you haven't completed a degree, don't worry about, hey, Kaylee, stop scrolling for a second. Just go back a little bit. It's hard for me to follow. Sorry. Okay, yeah, stay right there. If you haven't completed a degree, that's fine, but you can use something called ABD, which is all coursework but degree. You can also use, just the date that you're going to actually complete it if you're still in school. Grants and fellowships, honor, awards, and honors. So even if there's a category, like for instance, this one says exhibitions includes a combined list of solo, two-person, or group exhibitions. But also like some of the other headings, you'll see like the heading, grants and awards, grants and fellowships, awards and honors. Anything that sort of fits within that, you can put, and you can sort of customize the categories. Like I don't have a grants and awards, but I do have an awards and honors, if that makes sense. For the exhibition record, remember when I talked about like the jury of your peers and sort of that, sort of the weight of how we sort of list things? This is where you're going to think about those things. If you're a new artist, then you're going to only list maybe group exhibitions. If you've had more than 2 solo exhibitions, then perhaps you might want to consider having a specific category for just solo exhibitions. But always make sure that you notate if you have just an exhibitions list, that if there are any solo exhibitions, you note that. And it talks about what the professional standard is to note that on your CV. if you have, like I said, 50 exhibitions, you don't want to give them, this is supposed to be a 2 to 4 page maximum. This is your short CV. Do a selected, that's how you do it. And then select the ones that are the most important or the most relevant. If you have had your work, if it was juried, make sure you notate that. If your work was curated, make sure you notate the curator. It talks about how to do that and how to actually do that properly. As you scroll down, if you want to go down to commissions, and it talks very specifically in the exhibition piece and also in the education, it talks about what the professional standard is. The Chicago Manual Style for is an abbreviation of the province, an abbreviation of the country. How do you do that? And it will say. For commissions, again, remember these, a lot of times, these are going to be ones that are, you want to have as much information as possible. It goes through that. Collections are the ones that don't include dates. So you wouldn't include those. Some people don't actually want their information listed. So make sure that, if it could just be listed as private collection and then its location. I've seen that on many different CVs. So don't be afraid that if someone has collected your work, but they don't necessarily want to be listed on your CV, that's okay and that's reasonable. If you have work that's been purchased by your family and friends, the general rule of thumb is that you wouldn't include that, but I would leave it to you to decide the professional level of whether or not that's something that you would include. Bibliography. I do want to talk about this. So a bibliography, you have to keep in mind, are things that have been written and published about you and your artwork. So it's a bibliography is things that people have written about you or your work. And that's what you include in here. And there's, as you scroll down, if you scroll, yep, right there. Okay, so there's different places, things that are written about you or your work could show up. So in print, let's say somebody writes about it in the Calgary Herald. It could be on radio or television. Let's say there was, something on TV on the morning show that talked about a show at, the Stampede, and your work is there. You would put that in, and it shows exactly how to notate that. Go down a little bit, Kaylee. Online periodicals. So, in our day and age, there's lots of stuff written online, and it talks about how you do that. And don't worry about DOI. That's an old standard that you can just use the URL. The digital object identifier is like a real sort of, it was something we used a long time ago, but it's still here because I have seen them still. But you want to make sure that you actually are listing these appropriately. The biggest reason why is this. Just like when you're writing an essay and you're doing the footnotes and the reference material, you have to make sure that you actually do it properly. And that was one of my biggest hangups in school, was actually doing that properly. And I have a Chicago Manual Style book, but this is a really great little cheat sheet, which will show you different ways that different types of periodicals and things have to be actually cited. So then there's also blogs and website publications. And then, of course, if you have a lot of stuff that's been written about your work, then you would do a selected bibliography because you don't need to list 100 of them. Publications, stop right there, go back a little bit. Yeah, okay, so publications as author. So let's say you wrote about someone's work, or you wrote about something that's been published. You would then include that here. So let's say you wrote a catalog essay, or you wrote a review, or you wrote a blog. You would want to make sure that you put that in to your CV, and the different ways that you would actually do that is here. If you have any teaching experience, whether it be something really informal, it could be a guest lecture. It could be, let's say you have a friend who is a, elementary school teacher. For instance, I did a presentation for my kids' grade 3 class on Machu Picchu. That's included on my CV. Because I actually had them do a project, a sculptural project where they actually built Machu Picchu, which was crazy with 8-year-olds, but that's fine. And then we made it experience. So anything that you've done that doesn't necessarily fit into your exhibition or your creative practice CV, let's say you did do a curator, you did some curatorial work, lectures and workshops. If you did presentations or an artist talk, let's say you presented a talk on your work at a retirement living facility, that happens a lot. You would include that here. And this is another reason why I say go through every single one of these categories, because there's things you may have done that you didn't realize should actually be listed. And this is a good way to jog your memory of what you have done in the past and how it could actually relate to telling people about what your experience is. And again, curatorial projects, gallery affiliations, and client lists. I will say one thing about gallery affiliations. I'm not a big fan of including that on a CV. Unless there's a real good reason for it. I tend to always tell artists to leave that off, but really it's up to you. And essentially what that means is, are you a regular artist shown in a gallery? Are you part of a stable of artists at a gallery? And then you would include that. And then references, those things would only be included if you actually were applying to a job, and that would be the rest of it. And so I will provide this as well as the website information for you to find the rest of the information regarding, but that was the version of the short CV.
Okay. Can you see the customer avatar? Yeah.
No, it looks like it's melting.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. You should be able to see it now.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, is this yours or mine?
It's mine, but take it because I'll just jump in.
So moving on to the customer avatar, this is a marketing template that's used in business plans, in creating proposals for funding. A customer avatar helps artists identify who their ideal customer is. As Marianne has spoken about, knowing who your audience is, knowing who is seeing your work or who is reading your work is vitally important. So our customer avatar is something that might feel slightly strange to do because we are imagining our ideal group, our target market. But the way that we can flesh out who our customer avatar is by identifying this person's demographics, such as the typical age, gender, marital status, location, job title, income. All of the things in the center of this diagram matter because it helps us find the channels to contact them and to meet them. So the goals and the values, the challenges and pain points are the things that your customer wants to avoid in the purchase of your art or the encounter with your art. So this exercise of finding your customer avatar is a business practice that can benefit artists. An example of a customer avatar might be someone like this, a young woman. She has a certain persona. She might be looking for a wedding photographer, for example. And by the way, having an ideal customer persona in mind doesn't mean that anybody else cannot be your customer. It's just helping you identify who your target market is. So using that template, I populate this customer avatar for this person, Emily, who is looking for a wedding photographer. If I am a photographer, I really want to know what kind of person my work appeals to. So you fill in all this information, you think about what they like. Being very specific is very good. And then you can identify which type of work Emily will be attracted to based on her demographic, her goals, her background, her aspirations. So out of these two options, someone like Emily, who is stylish, who likes things to be unique and bespoke, who likes things to look editorial, might go for a photographer like Lolo and Noah. And this is a photographer who does a lot of work that's out of the box. Typical work might be something that looks more like alpine peak photography on the right side of your screen. This is not something that Emily would find attractive. And how do we know that? We know that because of her background. So the whole exercise of imagining your customer avatar is something that we really encourage, something that isn't taught necessarily, but the more you interface with your clients, the more you get to know the kind of people who like the work you do, the better it is for you to find them in whatever spaces they like to play in.
And keep in mind that the customer avatar is also relatable to, let's say you want to show your work at a specific place. Using that customer avatar piece and actually going through it, using the gallery as your customer and going through what their goals and challenges are, it helps you identify how you can sort of connect with them on a level where you're meeting their needs, which then increases the likelihood of them actually wanting to work with you. And it goes back to
Absolutely.
that.
The customer can be an organization. It can be another business. If your business model is selling to other businesses or other organizations as a service provider, then that customer avatar becomes the space of the organization. Yeah. Okay, so moving on into networking now. Networking, the term we like to use is relationship building. I know that a lot of you can coil at this term networking, but it's something that's very important. So identifying what type of network you need, whether that be many people with weaker ties, or whether that be smaller groups of people who you have stronger ties with. So think about it in terms of the quantity of people that you naturally network with, whether that be a lot or a few, and then think about it secondarily as ties. Is that tie a weak tie or is it a strong tie? And those terms don't indicate a preference. A weak tie can be good in some cases. A strong tie can be good in some cases. So there are 3 different types of networking styles: expansionists, brokers, and conveners. These little drawings, these sketches will hopefully help you understand right away whether there'd be many and weaker ties or fewer and stronger ties. So if we are a convener, we're the type of networker who prefers closure, similarity, safety, and trust. These are smaller groups of acquaintances and friends. These groups are usually mutually connected to one another. Examples I like to give are tight groups of friends like the show Friends, where there's a circle of trust. There are people who will have your back no matter what. The cons, though, of this type of networking is that it can be perceived as snobby, as a clique, or as something that really promotes groupthink, which is what we want to try to avoid. We want to be around people who are different enough from us when it comes to certain fields. So the convener is fewer ties, strong ties and fewer people. Secondarily, the broker type is a networker who will prefer diversity, interacting in many social spaces with different kinds of people and seeing new opportunities for people. So these are groups of friends who do not overlap. If you tend to make friends with people in your community and then friends with people at your church, or friends with people in the town you grew up in, they're all disparate groups. You as a broker would find ways to connect these people who don't know each other and facilitate new connections between them. So typical brokering networks allow you to increase the diversity and perspectives amongst your groups. These kinds of people, when put into new situations, are easily adaptable. The cons of a brokering network can be that you as a broker may seem mysterious or difficult to know. It might not inspire a lot of trust because you don't necessarily want to make close, strong ties. So the third type that you can think about employing is the expansionist. And expansionists are people who value popularity, people who value power, and spend a lot of their time making new connections. It's a priority for them. So these people have many weak ties. They collect contacts. They remember names and faces. They think of how best to use the contact, and they are often persuasive in their aims. So expansionist networks tend to involve people who have sort of a halo effect. When they come into a room, people look at them, people gravitate towards them, people feel like they know them. And people like this will often be good to know if you are involved in the kind of art practice that requires a lot of people. So it is something to note. These three types of networking styles have been written about by Yale academics. Marissa King is an author whose name we'll include in the documents we share with you after the talk. And she's written at length about the pros and cons of employing these three types of strategies. Now, you will naturally be one over the other, but I'd like to invite you to think about, trying to adjust the style of network based around your career goal. Okay, so we have three different types of networking approaches: verbal, physical. Sounds that we make affect our network. We have online networks as well, which include social media and how we like things on social media or share information on social media. So whether this be in person or online, we have different approaches available to us to grow our network. And so just quickly, I don't know if anyone has heard of Mehrabian's rule, but this is the rule that largely 55% of our language and our communication is bodily. So more than verbal, more than vocal, the sounds, our body language speaks the loudest when we meet people, and especially when we interview. So keeping in mind things that are physical are often the things that are most remembered in your encounter with new people. So some images here of positive body language, some images of not so positive body language. And always being conscious that we want to be making eye contact. So we're going to go through these. With a tone of voice, obviously, number 2 is probably the best way to address a potential problem. Certainly not number 3.
I like number 3.
Marianne likes number 3. If we have a confrontation, a situation that we need to get to the bottom of, there's a certain tone, certain language that's better than the other. So the most gentle, appropriate way in a work setting is, of course, number 3. And finally, when we're dealing with multi-generational situations, we want to be very careful with tone. And number 3, again, would be the most preferential way to deal with the situation. Marianne?
Yeah, so, the biggest reason why we thought it was important to sort of include the networking information, not just because it's not charm school, but I think sometimes we forget that every time we're out and about, regardless of where we are social animals, and who we talk to and who we know are going to help connect us. And so if we know how to speak to people, we understand sort of like how our body is telling them a story in terms of the eye contact and whether we're being sincere and using simple language and just respecting other people's time, because ultimately it's going to be the people that you connect with that really help expand your practice and expand your opportunities. I don't think I have had a job since 2000 Two, I haven't had a job that I didn't get from knowing someone. To be quite honest, knowing somebody or somebody reached out to me and said, hey, I think you'd be perfect for this if you thought about it. So, and I have a lot of opportunities that have come my way, same thing. And so it's really about, and I'm a bit more of a convener, but I collect people and have deeper relationships because I'm not a schmoozer. But these are the things that I think are important to remember and to keep in mind when you're out and about, because you never know who you're going to meet, and you're never going to know when you have the opportunity to sort of practice those networking skills to really expand what you're trying to do. And, you know, different ways you got to think about where you're going to be communicating, who you're communicating with, and, you know, weak ties and motivations, whether you're communicating with customers, there's a way to communicate with them. If you're communicating with your peers, there's a way to communicate with them. Communicating with mentors, and understand that 9 times out of 10, people want to talk about themselves. So if you're looking to connect with someone, then really you need to ask them and be open to like hearing what it is they have to say, and not trying to get them to understand you. It's really about that back and forth.
Yeah, I think it's really important for artists to consider it one of their jobs to reach out to people instead of waiting for that movement to come to them. It's very important to be always reaching out. So social spaces and meeting people should be on your list of goals in terms of, like Marianne said, expanding your network, getting to know new people. Literally everybody you come into contact with, even if they're not a typical customer, will help grow your practice, your network. So different social spaces and meeting new people is something that can easily help you in your career. Mentors and mentees, this is something that in our culture isn't as valued as it should be, but becoming a mentor or searching out a mentor is very important to understanding the world from different perspectives. And so, you know, baking cookies for your elderly neighbor is something that might unfold into an incredible relationship where you learn things that you would never think of. And inversely, if you do have time and expertise to share with someone else, younger than you, doesn't have to be an age issue, just somebody newer to a certain skill set that you've mastered, you're opening yourself up to a whole new demographic there as well.
And it's really about creating opportunities. And so, you know, taking those opportunities, and, you know, I'm not a big fan of going out and hitting all the industry, you know, sort of events and doing that whole thing. I'm not built like that. I can do it if I have to, and I do force myself to. And honestly, you have to force yourself a bit. But there's also ways you have to consider how you're communicating. So let's say you're doing an email introduction. I'm just going to read through this, and I want you to consider whether or not this is a reasonable way to introduce yourself via email. Hey, I'm John Smith, and I'm a graphic designer. I'm interested in working for your company because your products are awesome. I've got lots of skills to offer your clients. It'd be great to meet you so I can show you my portfolio. The best time for me to meet is the afternoon. Cheers, John. Versus, I want to show you another one. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. I'm writing to introduce myself as a graphic designer with interest in learning more about opportunities with this company. I admire your products because I have developed many transferable skills such as blank and blank from my previous volunteer work in. If possible, I would be grateful to show you my portfolio. I look forward to meeting you if there is interest. Best regards. Now, the one on the left may seem just informal, but in fact, if it was me receiving these, I might be slightly offended, because I'd be much more open to receiving the one on the right, because A, they took time to understand what I do by saying they admire my products because, and it's not about blowing smoke up anyone's behind. It's really about relating yourself to say, hey, I think there's a connection between the two of us in this way, and I would really value your input. And again, I said before, people like to talk about themselves, and people generally like to share their knowledge. And so if you go in being generous yourself and open to that feedback, one of these examples provides more openness than the other. And I want you to consider that when you're actually reaching out to people. And then contacting peers and acquaintances for leads in a job search. Now, this could be something, I know lots of people will reach out to people they know on LinkedIn specifically and talk about, hi, we know each other from this place. I'm currently looking for a new job. I called to ask if you know of any job opportunities available either with your firm or any others you might know about. For the past, 2 years, I've been studying working at engineering school, and I'm looking for a job as an engineer. Can you think of anyone who I might connect with? And then if they say no, I really appreciate your time. I'd like to send you my resume. If you can think of anyone who might be interested, please pass it along to them. Thanks. Versus, a different sort of way of looking at this, which is instead of giving them an opportunity to say, no, we have no opportunities and I don't know any, you need to say, listen, I don't know if maybe you can talk to me about sort of what you do and what the opportunities you see for this field. And, I'd like to talk to you about my experience and whether or not you think that I'm sort of in the right field or whether or not I'd fit in with your industry. Give them an opportunity to talk about themselves. Don't just go in from a position of want, go in from a position of sharing. And that's a big one. Contacting customers to share new art, same thing. Hello, this is Marianne. Thank you for your purchase of Starry Night. I'm ready to share my new series of paintings. These works may appeal to you because, as I recall, you really loved the night sky. Feel free to connect with me. Well, how about this? You really love the night sky. And I know that you also mentioned you like constellations, and this work particularly focuses on that. Feel free to connect with me and get in touch if you have any questions. If you refer a friend who purchases my work, I'd be happy to provide you with a discount on your next purchase. Thank you. All the best. And the truth is again, you're relating it back to them. This isn't just a boilerplate, sort of form thing that you're sending out to everybody. You're letting them know that you paid attention when you talk to them. You're thanking them for actually being a customer previously, letting them know you have new work that maybe they might be interested in. And maybe if they're not, if they refer somebody, there's an incentive for them to come back. It's really just another example of that give and take. Okay. Instead of just looking to take or to give, it's the give and take.
And I would also add, anytime you can add a story or listen to their story, you're opening it up for more conversation, more learning, more things to file in your memory bank.
And a deeper connection with people.
Connection. Yeah.
The same thing with cold calls and emails. I was referred to you by Kaylee. My name is Marianne, and I recently graduated from AU Arts with a BFA in sculpture. I'm positive adjective about me. I would like to inquire about the possibility of meeting with you to discuss if there are any openings or opportunities at this firm organization. The advantage that I would bring is, and this is again, you're telling them what you're bringing to them, but also be open about, I'm not sure. I'd like to discuss not just what you can do for me, but I'd really like some knowledge and input. That sharing piece is big. Okay. And you talk about their mission and vision, the benefit to you and your organizations that you have a long-term employee with a strong commitment and mission, and you state their mission back to them, which shows that you actually went and looked at what it is they do and what they're about. And it's not just, it's that connection piece that's so important.
And it's also visiting places in person, physically. If someone comes into a gallery, if an artist comes in and delivers a resume portfolio, that is much more likely a connection that will grow than just a random email that isn't very well crafted. So the connection piece, following up to a certain degree, is always very good. Brief, direct, positive, and always asking for how you can benefit them is great. Do we have time for this?
I don't know. It's 8:48.
Okay. I'm going to just give you the brief version of Blue Ocean Strategy. The Blue Ocean Strategy comes directly from entrepreneurship. And it's the idea that we can find a blue ocean of uncontested market space when we are looking to market and sell our products. So whether you operate a business where you make work or you offer a service to people, blue ocean is the territory that you want to find that is clear of any competition. So the blue ocean strategy is also referred to as no competition strategy. We don't want to live in a red ocean that's bloodied by competition. We don't want to mimic our competition because there's only so much that the market can bear. But if we find a new market space by tweaking some of the basic features of an industry, we're more likely to succeed and we won't have that level of competition. So these are some features of red ocean versus blue ocean. We don't want to compete, we want to create. We don't want to beat the competition, we would rather make the competition irrelevant by differentiating our product or service. Instead of exploiting demand, we want to create and capture new demand. Instead of making the value cost trade-off, we want to break that trade-off. Now, examples might be companies like Uber, companies like Airbnb that found a way to work around the competition by not even owning a fleet of vehicles, not even owning property as hotels. You might ask, how do we relate this to the art world? Cirque du Soleil is an example of a very successful Canadian dance and performative troupe that changed the way people experience the circus. They took out the animals, they put in the acrobatics. They made things more theatrical. Their audience changed from children to adults, but they found a blue ocean in what they did. Now, in the art world, in the world of creative industry, in a world that we're living in today where all the boundaries are being broken down and artists are working across industries, looking at adjacent industries to use and be inspired by, we have stores that look like this. We have new market spaces being reinterpreted. So instead of just selling one object, you might sell many. You might include an installation. All of this is to broaden your customer base and to appeal to the most people as many people as possible. So we really do encourage any kind of artist to be experimental in their practice and to be innovative in their practice. So I'd like to just show you some work here. This is do we have time for this? I'll leave that link up for you to look at yourself. There's a YouTube link. This is an artist who was able to use experimentation and innovation and collaboration to create really unique pieces that are both historical and contemporary. And her work is primarily embroidery and textiles. She also merges this with the digital practice of emojis, all based on the idea of courtship ritual and what used to be florography, what used to be the language of flowers, what has now become emojis and texting. So her art practice is gaining a lot of traction, attention, and momentum because she was able to innovate in a way that was completely new. And I would say this was a blue ocean approach where she stumbled upon a collaboration in working with digital artists and meshing that with her own more traditional approach to art, which is embroidery. So with that, we're going to end with kind of a sarcastic quote. I don't know if anyone here is a fan of Jerry Seinfeld, but I stumbled upon an interview he was doing with Howard Stern a couple days ago, and I told Marianne about it. And he said, success is finding the level of torture you're comfortable with. Meaning, we all do things that we don't like to do. Getting out to network isn't the most enjoyable experience for us. Being creative on a regular basis can be exhausting and draining. Living in a city that sometimes finds it, we find it challenging to be artists can be difficult. But once we get used to that level of, let's say, hard work and effort, we can succeed. And is there anything you'd like to say to finish, Marianne?
No, just if you guys have any questions, we're open to any questions if you have any.
I would say everybody turn on your mics and your cameras if you like, and we can just have an open discussion for the last few minutes.
And we're going to provide lots and lots of information afterwards. So you're welcome to go through that.
That was a fantastic, informative talk.
Absolutely.
Really like to thank you, Kaylee and Marianne, and thank you everyone for participating tonight. We do have our AGM coming up May 17th. You're more than welcome to attend. Please do. And if there are any questions at all, please feel free to voice them. Thanks.